Hello, everybody, and welcome to the AI Surge podcast, where we explore how AI is shaping industries and accelerating innovation. I'm your host, Surgical, and today I'd like to welcome everybody to Nick Loise, who is the founder of Sales Performance Team and your sales recruiter based in Chicago, Illinois. Welcome to the AI Surge podcast, Nick, and looking forward to a great conversation.
Surj, thank you. Thank you for all that you're doing, helping people kind of deal with this maze of AI. Is it for me? Is it not for me? How do I use it? I think, not only do I struggle with that, and I think of myself as a pretty good student, but the business owners that we deal with every day are trying to figure out, right? And so I appreciate the work that you do, putting this podcast together and bringing this information to business owners across the world, right? Because you're in Canada, I'm in Chicago. We're being friendly no matter what our governments are doing to each other. So I appreciate that.
Well, you're welcome, Matt. And you raise a good point, Nick. Recent data shows that 80% of companies, typically on the small to medium-sized scale, want to adapt AI. They just don't know what to do with it. So that you make a very good point. So hopefully this episode gives them some inspiration. But Nick, please tell me a little bit about yourself for the audience. What makes Nick tick and what you enjoy before we get into the sales performance team.
Well, I appreciate that. I like to say that, first I'm a husband and then a father. And sometimes in my career, I didn't have that priority set. So I'm making an effort in my later stages to make sure I see if you've got pictures in the back of family and things like that. So that's the most important thing. That's the driver of me. I've been in sales, been in marketing, business my entire life, really been blessed. Worked with a lot of great companies. Now, this is my second entrepreneurial run. First one, I had some venture capital. We had an exit, and then went back to kind of work in an organization, learned a lot from that, and then launched this company. We've been doing it now for 7 years, have kind of grown to two different companies. We have a recruiting arm and a sales management arm. And I work with small to mid-sized businesses. So that's the fun part every day, working with entrepreneurs, kind of established entrepreneurs that are looking to grow and scale their business. They're probably doing about 1 to 2 to 3 million or 25 million, and they want to grow and systematize their sales. So that's what I do. On personal side, I'm a family man. I'm a foodie. We love to travel. I love to kind of be involved with the kids, get them involved as possible. My wife and I are a golfer. My son and I are golfers. Do the pickleball thing, right? As all middle-aged athletes have to do, and so it's fun. Now's the time of our life where our kids are self-sufficient. Knock on wood, we did some right things, and so we're able to kind of enjoy this season, if you will.
Yeah, well, it's funny. Pickleball is spreading its wings from Chicago, Illinois to Vancouver, Canada. So it's growing everywhere. But please tell me about this journey of founding the sales performance team. What did that look like? When did you think, hey, this is a service that the industry needs, and how did that journey come about?
Yeah, so I was, as you said in my bio, I was in a large sales and marketing, education, and kind of white label done for you business. And we work with small to mid-sized businesses. And what I found, Surge, is that every business owner, they could figure out marketing, right? They could figure out their copy and they could figure out lead generation, and they had to survive, right? So they've got it figured out. Maybe there's different tools and maybe they're acquiring customer digitally versus different methods, but they understood it. But when they really kind of talked to you, they all had their heart broken about hiring the wrong salesperson. They all had somebody they hired that they thought was going to do well. They all struggled. If they admitted it, were like, I'm not a good manager of salespeople. I just don't do it well. And so I'm like, well, there's probably a play here. Many of them would say, hey, can you manage mine? And they're like, no, it's one is you couldn't afford me. And two is, I'm happy where I'm at. But I'm like, well, can I spend my time with fractionally managing sales teams, right? So they get 10 hours a week or 5 hours a week or 20, just depending on how big of a company they are and how many salespeople they are. And so I launched we used to do workshops, right, where they come in and pay us $12,000 to $15,000, and we would help them build out their sales process and their sales plan. And I'm like, you know what? There's a business here. So I kind of launched it. Certainly COVID was an accelerator. It was horrible what it did to the world, the travesty. I think we're still rebounding from that psychologically and culturally and all that. but from my business, it was really, really successful. And so, we kind of grew. And then we have coaches that work with our clients. We have a back team in the Philippines that do a lot of our programming and and run high end analysis for us. And then about 2 years ago, or about a year and a half ago, we launched Your Sales Recruiter, which is a recruiting arm, and that came from I was having a conversation as a reference check for somebody that sold for me for a while ago. And the HR person was going through a checklist. You could just tell. Wonderful person, great person, and probably had 15 other calls to take care of. But she was asking all the wrong questions when it came to hiring a salesperson. And I stopped her. I said, well, first off, he's a good, hire him, he'll do fine. But you're asking the wrong questions, right? These are the questions you should be answering. And I'm like, I wonder how many organizations struggle with hiring sales managers because we heard that salespeople, we heard that they can't manage them, but my guess is they're hiring the wrong people because they're asking the wrong questions in the in the interview process, in the discovery process, right? So it's a sales process of recruiting. So we created Your Sales Performance Team, which helps organizations. Just started out helping our clients, but now we take recruitment jobs too. And that's continued to grow, and we're doing really well, really well. So we're having a lot of fun with that product line also.
That's so interesting, Nick, because I think you're bang on. And not to make light of it, but I think a lot of interview questions are the same regardless of the skill set or the discipline. They're just X, A, B, C, and not specific to a lot of um, focus, be it HR or finance or marketing or sales or whatever, whatever role is involved in a different business. But well, that's very interesting that you found, okay, to get the right person, you need to ask the right questions.
You got to think of it like a sales process, right? So you got to ask the right discovery questions. You got to figure out what the objections are of them joining your organization, and you could mirror and match that to how did you do this, right? So what does a discovery process for you look like, and how did you do that? But in title of for the title of this podcast, which is really AI. AI is an accelerator for us in the recruiting side of the business because it allows us to really source candidates. So we use a product that's called Perfect AI that will allow me to go out there and search for candidates and then run an outreach for candidates. In such a fast, pace where in the past you had to pay somebody, on hourly rate to do that. Now AI is doing it. And if you really write a really good job description, it could really tighten up your ideal candidate profile, ICP, and do a great job of really finding the right candidates and then running them through an outreach campaign. So from an AI perspective, we really, really enjoy that. It's kind of fun to watch it screen the resumes or the people. It's kind of spooky a little bit too, where in the past, right, you had to do it or somebody on your team had to do that. Now AI is doing it in about 3 seconds, if at that's probably a second. And you also say, okay, how many good people, but then you say, how many good people are we missing, right? Because maybe it's missing a nuance, right? Or the word that you programmed in it. So the AI will get better as we kind of communicate with it more. But yeah, on the recruitment side, we see a lot of really cool stuff going on with AI. And I do think it's going to change that world as it's uprooting all other businesses as we speak.
Yeah, well, I'm glad it's making you and your team more efficient, so you can focus on the bigger picture, right? And I appreciate your experience with sales and marketing, and I've led sales and marketing teams for a couple of different organizations. And you're right. Once you get the branding down and the budget down, then you can put systems in place on the marketing side. But sales can be quite tricky. What I found where some people are great at interviews, but maybe not great at a job, or vice versa. They're not so good in interviews, but they could be excellent salespeople. And some might be both, but sometimes you don't know until you know.
It's fascinating that you say that. We say this all the time. Just because they were successful at XYZ 1, 2, 3, or 4, 5, 6 company does not translate to your company, to your customers, to your prospects. Sometimes you have to say too, and I'll use an example. I remember I had a client on the phone, and he was lamenting. He's like, I got these 3 salespeople and they just can't sell. And he was a digital agency. And so we've done a lot of work in that space. And I had an agency for a while too. And I said, well, tell me about their background. He's like, well, they all came from Google. And I said, well, first off, nobody has to sell Google. Everybody buys Google. So they're used to having a brand, right? And using that brand to get in the door. They also don't have to manufacture a demand because everybody and their brother needs to be on Google in some way, shape, or form. I just need to use it better than my competition, cheaper, so that way I can get. And so you have to think about the person that you're hiring. Were they taking a product to the marketplace that everybody wanted and needed? Were they used to selling for a big brand that opened the door, that gave them everything that they needed? And they were really, in essence, de facto order takers, not taking anything away from them, but they were selling a product that didn't need to be manufactured. The demand was there. And so we think about that a lot when we are working on with our clients to hire them the right people, because sometimes they get enamored by big brands and big names. And we say, sure, but just remember, he or she is used to using that big brand or big name. The customer knows exactly that big brand and big name where they don't know your brand, right? So the old adage, and you and I grew up probably around the same time, no one got fired for buying an IBM. Right now, my guess is we're gonna have to change that phrase a little bit. But IBM sold. Hey, listen, you're never gonna get fired for making that decision to go with IBM. And today, that's probably true with the Googles of the world, or the Microsofts of the world, or the Salesforces of the world. There's probably better products or services out there. Certainly, there's a lot of upstarts that would say they're better, but nobody knows them, right? And so your hedging risk has a middle manager or a director in an organization, and how much political capital am I going to burn on this purchase? And if I make the wrong decision, I may not get fired, but I'm going to lose some political position. And so you have to think about that all the time with when you look at who am I hiring, and where past, as you said, past success does not guarantee future success, and it's for a number of different reasons.
I see on your website a write up on the diseconomy of sales scale actually, and you break it down to 5 ways. Do you want to elaborate on that a little bit?
Hey, I'd love to. We love talking about this. So the first thing is you think about the old good to great book, right? And it's getting the right people on the bus, right? So the first thing, we call it kind of the 5 Ps, right? So it's the first P is people, right? So who are the right people for what I have to sell in my marketplace, right? And so what does that look like? I can't have a guy in Brooks Brothers button down blue suits trying to sell to rural farmers. It just won't work, right? And so you have to kind of realize that. So get the right people on the bus. Then you have to say, okay, what is the process that we're going to do? How are we going to sell? How are we going to get things in the top of the funnel? You and I talked about our history and our past of getting leads in, the kind of defining the lead, defining the sales process. So really what's the process? We call it a perfect sales process, realizing that every process is imperfect. So you kind of have to look for the constraints in your sales process once you create it, and take those constraints out. Then we look at what's the playbook, right? So where are we at from a playbook perspective? And what should they say? What are the emails? We want to give them those tools. They may make them their own, and I'm fine with that, but I have to at least give them some level of playbook. I tell them who to target, what the words are to target, what the phrases are, what the problems that we solve, what's the unique selling proposition, USP, the unique problem that features in the marketplace. We always focus on the problems, right? Because we will spend more to get rid of problems than we will to find pleasure. So that's the next phase. Then we look at the production. So what does successful production look like to get to the quotas and the revenue that we need to as an organization? And I worked with somebody, actually use him as a coach, and I do a lot of work with him. And he really broke it down to how many activities have to happen to get us one appointment or one lead or one sale. And it could be globally, we have to do 200 something. whatever that is, whether it's an email, whether it's a LinkedIn touch, whether it's a call, whether it's a direct mail, whether it's a carrier pigeon, I don't care. But how many things do we need to do? And that's where the production comes point. And we could always break down every problem because it's usually a production problem or a pipeline problem. The salespeople are pretty skilled at selling, but they just don't have enough people to talk to. Right. So we kind of look at, okay, the people, right? Then what's the process? What does the playbook look like? What's the production looking like along the way? And then how are we giving feedback, right, in that loop? Right, what's that feedback loop look like? Much like how a team deals with it, right? We talked a little bit about football and sports and the Canadian sport world compared to the American sport world. But really, if you think about it, all the great coaches are constantly giving feedback. So they're looking at game film. Where did we break down? What went wrong? What went well? And sure, AI can help us with some of that, which is kind of the scope of this, but it's really focusing on all of that. And if you do it all right, right, you've got a great sales process and formula, and you just keep on adding water to it. And once you get that down, it's easy for you to scale up by hiring salespeople, getting them in place, getting them onboarded faster and into production faster, so they're not burning cash. So that's the high level of it.
There's an interesting point here. I'm just reading about something that a challenge a lot of companies face when they're looking for sales leadership is they might just promote their best salesperson, but that doesn't necessarily solve the issue, right? Because they may be good at executing, but maybe not so good at managing. I thought that was an excellent point there.
Yeah, we see that a lot, and unfortunately what happens, Serge, is that you have to come in and unwind that, and you wanna do it in a very delicate manner because you don't wanna lose that best salesperson. You don't want them to lose political clout, cultural clout, that you don't want them to be unhappy. But I was just coming back from a client meeting, and it was a 500-person convention that they were doing, and they had a lot of business owners, but they had a lot of salespeople, and I was sitting at a round table where they were discussing the problems and the struggles that sales managers make. Two young guys sat down at the table, and they had a list of questions. I was very impressed by their level of questions and their keen seeking solutions. And I stopped them at one point. I said, "Hey, were you guys in sales? And then you got promoted to sales manager?" They said, "Yes." I said, "When you were in sales, did you make more as a salesperson or a sales manager?" And they're like, "Oh, salesperson." I said, "When were you happier?" "Well, when I was a salesperson," right? And I'm like, I go, "If you had to unwind it or do it again, would you take the promotion?" They're like, "Knowing what I know, no, but I'm in it now, so I got to fix it." And they were at least looking for solutions. So I appreciate that. But so many times what we do, and you pointed it out, and I think we write a lot about it, is we have the best salesperson, and maybe he or she's a little bit tired of selling, right? Prospecting wears us down. Maybe they're looking for a little change, or maybe they want to get into management. And so on Friday, we promote them to sales leader, sales manager, sales director, VP of sales, whatever we want to call it. And on Monday, they show up. And the only thing that happened was the weekend, right? We don't give them any tools. We don't give them any training. The intrinsic value of going out and finding business is what drove them on Friday. What has to drive them on Monday is the intrinsic value of mentoring people, of growing people, of finding people on the right teams and giving them the tools and equipment to be successful. And so that's a different archetype that we have to build. And listen, management is tough and leadership is even tougher. And there are people that have been doing it their entire lives and are still trying to find their way doing it. But we expect this sales person who is great at going out and drumming up business, who is great at pushing things over the edge, who is great at being kind of a lone wolf, now to come in and be in charge of the den. And it's going to be wrought with failure unless you, as the business owner or the president or the CEO, whatever it is, realizes this and get them some help. And there's some great sources of truth out there for people. We do a lot of work in this where we kind of train them up. But it really is painful when we get that call for me, because I know what has happened is everybody's intentions were honorable and everybody wanted the right thing. But what we've done is we've kind of set that person or persons up for failure. And so we got to fix it. Right. And we gotta create some learning environments for them so they could either get skilled up and change their behaviors, or they're going to have to go back into a production role. Or the worst thing that happens is they have to leave the organization. And that's just painful because it wasn't them. It really the organization let them down.
It's so fascinating because it's not as simple as a sales role. Like very much like in marketing, you have your different components, right? You got your digital marketing, which breaks down into, social SEO, SEM, and then you have your loyalty, you got your branding, you got your strategy. But even on the sales side, you got like you said, your hunters, right? You got your acquisition people, you got your prospectors, you got your retention people who just manage accounts. And then that Google example, it's just inbounds, right? You're processing people that are coming to you. And so you have to find that sweet spot for a sales manager, don't you?
Yep. It is tough. And certainly the tools of AI can help, right? Can help you with your playbook creation. There are tools of AI that could help you become a better manager or give feedback or do call reviews or let's call it the blocking and tackling of sales leadership. But there's the innateness and the driver, right? And so many times we put the wrong personality type into positions and hoping that they're going to be successful. And you got to give them the tools and you've got to do some level of discovery on what their motivations are, what's their drivers, kind of where they at. Are they open to receiving feedback and learning? And, I think everybody in sales has the opinion that their sales leader or manager is an idiot and they could do a much better job, right? And I'm pointing a finger and I got four going back at me, right? We all think that we could do a better job until I always say never judge somebody until you sit in that seat, right? And then they realize, oh geez, there's a lot of dynamics at play and there's a
Oh
lot
yeah.
of pressure at play. So it is fascinating, and I agree with you, Serge. The on the marketing side, right, or there's the in vogue rage is more CRO, right, Chief Revenue Officer. But I think a lot of that too is there's the tactician, as you talked about, at the associate level or the director level. They're very good at email marketing or lead acquisition or digital or that type of thing. But then you get up and they've got to learn positioning and strategy and competitive positioning. And it's a different conversation and a different skill set. I was listening after graduate school, I had the benefit of being able to speak the language of business, which has a tendency to be more on the finance side, right? So what does the balance sheet say? What does the income statement say? What's the cost of acquisition CAC of a customer, all those things. And if you can't speak those languages, you aren't going to be able to communicate to that. I remember what's the average tenure of a marketing, CMO is 17 months or anything like that. And I think for a chief sales officer, it's even quicker. It's like 14 or 15 months. It takes you 9 months to figure out the political landscape or even find the bathroom, let alone that, but we want immediate thing. But a lot of it is that they're not speaking the same language as the C-suite, right? And I think Forbes did a great article on this, or Fortune, somebody did, and it was the CEO doesn't care what the email conversion rate is, right? But that's the language of a marketing director. Oh, well, our email has got a 3% open rate and, they don't care, right? So you have to speak the language of the C-suite. And we as leaders have to become better at articulating that and teaching that to people so that they are constantly up-leveling their skills. AI is a good source of truth for that. And there's a lot of really, really good educational programs that people could get to. Some of them are for free. There's a lot of great stuff, and some of them you'll have to have some level of investment.
So I just get a sense, Nick, that you're quite talented at teaching, coaching, communicating, which has led to your success. But what would you say you're most proud of with your roles at the sales performance team and your sales recruiter?
I think it's that you creating something from scratch, creating something from dirt, right? And watching it plant and watching it grow and building it and making something for the world and producing jobs and producing value and producing output and improving people's lives and owners' lives because of it. So I think it's just that, right? I think we as entrepreneurs constantly think about that and focus on how can I add value to the marketplace and how do I build something, right? And it isn't sunshine and roses, right? I'd be lying to myself if I said that every day is that, but it's just that overall. And then you get to that point where the calls start coming in and you're not going out there and having to hunt for the business, and that makes it fun. But it's that. I think that and listen, we were we started in COVID. The world was a different world, right? The way we sell in 2020 is much different than the way we sell in 2026. And then there was the slowing down because of the tariffs. And a lot of clients and a lot of prospects were scared and they were trying to figure it out. And then that went away. Then that's now coming back. And now we've got this certainly intriguing environment with what's going on as we're recording this with Iran. And so what is that going to be? And if you're not thinking about 5 steps ahead as a business owner, as a sales owner, and saying, okay, there's going to be some changes, you're doing yourself and your business and your clients a disservice. So you've got to be thinking about that. So, it's not for the good news of business is it's always changing. The bad news is it's always changing, and it's not for the faint of heart.
No, you're right, and you mentioned that, there's a nice tipping point when the calls are coming to you versus, you having to go hunt for the business, but you mentioned it wasn't always sunshine and roses, and it's not always for any business, right? So what are the challenges that, you or you would say the industry is still facing at this particular point?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think, the number one challenge that I and every business owner faces is how do I make sure that I am constantly filling the funnel with qualified prospects, right? And I think that's one of the biggest reasons why I said it earlier, salespeople fail, but I also think why businesses fail, right? It's just that we don't have enough cash on hand to understand the sales cycle and build enough pipeline, if you will. And I think you have to do that every day. And so, yeah, I don't take it for granted that the calls are coming in, but I'm still trying to figure out, different ways to fill the top of the funnel and get that to happen, whether it's being on phenomenal podcasts like yours or writing or figuring out how do I, make sure that I get in AI searches and SEO and doing webinars and giving speeches and all of that. So I think you got to constantly be saying, how do we get people to raise their hand, or at least when I reach out to them, they're receptive to that. That's the first thing we think about all the time. Second thing we think about is mailboxes, email boxes are getting crowded, right? I just before you and I got on this morning, I was going through mine. I'm like, I've got 25 emails that don't make any sense to what I do in my inbox, right? Cold emails. And so, the inbox is messy. And so if you think about that, now when we go to LinkedIn, the LinkedIn inbox is messy, right? There's just junk in there. There's noise in there. There's really bad messaging. There was one that was really good messaging, though it wasn't something that I wanted or needed or that fit for me. It was a great message. And I said that to them. I said, this is a great message. I'm not your target customer, but good job on your copywriting, right? So there's noise in that. And some of the tools maybe is causing that, right? So it's easy to kind of spit out junky messaging through Chat GPT or Claude, and we have to put some human intelligence to process it and say, is this a good message or is this not a good message? So I think it's always that. How do I constantly fill the top of the funnel? How do I make sure my messaging is getting out? How do I crystallize my messaging, whether it's, back in the day when I first started as a marketer, it was one to one. Well, yeah, how do you make your messaging one to one? What does that look like? And so we think about that all the time, right? When we think about how do we make it better? How do we get cut through the noise? How do we get to the inbox with irrelevant messaging? And then taking people through days. I think I read there's at least 7 to 12 people around a buying decision in a large organization. It was probably 3 to 4 before COVID. And so now that's a lot of political maneuvering you have to do as a salesperson. There's a lot of different personalities that you have to manage and understand and map out and give them different information so they choose you. So there's a lot of dynamics in place in the sales process today of what's going on. We mentioned some of them with tariffs and social economical, all that stuff that's happening. It's business is never easy, but I think it's a little bit more interesting at this moment than it's been even a year or 2 ago.
Interesting as a word. Ain't that the truth? Because you're right. There's more people involved. There's more technology available. We've seen as much change probably in the last 5 years since COVID than we've
Oh, yeah,
seen in the
I agree.
last 100 years. So, let me ask you, Nick. What problem do you think AI or automation could solve for a company like yours or for your clients? Do you see a common pain point, or does each company have its own opportunities for leveraging technology?
I think it's yes and yes, certainly, Search. I think if I think about the sales process, right? So you break it down to a couple of different things. I think the creation of really well-defined lists, right? So who are we going to go after? AI helps with, right? It's phenomenal. I mean, I'm old enough to remember when we used to go out and buy the manufacturer's guide, right? And we'd flip through the manufacturer's guide, and that's who we'd be calling on. You're laughing because you remember, right? And then it became on CD-ROM, so you could kind of search it. That was like a game changer. Well, now I've got 4 to 5 different, chat, prompts to go out and find my best clients and get that information. So I think it's that, right? That's the first thing it could do. It could really tighten up my list. It could probably help me with my ICP, ideal customer profile, avatar, target market, whatever you want to call. So really you could kind of define who they are, where are they at on the org chart, what are their problems, and it could help me crystallize those thinkings. So I think that's the first thing. The list, right? Phenomenal. I think there's some tools, right? So if you think about different email warm up tools and processing tools and that, phenomenal. Some of my clients use HubSpot. I think the AI tools in there is just really phenomenal, right? Helping get to intent, helping get to the information that we need when we're on discovery calls. So we're making really intelligent questions and having a really good basis points. I think there's some phenomenal tools with that. I think, obviously it does a great job with helping create better proposals, better things. Let's call it the sales side of it, the marketing side, whether it's sales sheets or case studies or that. It helps compile that and create those rapidly, where maybe in the past we had to make our marketing person or a graphic designer fill those out. Now we could get those really, really fast with Canva and some plugins. So I think it's an accelerator. I think it's an accelerator. I think there's a nuance where you try to use it in sales management for call reviews. I think there's some pluses and minus to that. I think it could make sure that they're hitting the key points, or you could get to here's all the things that they're asking. So I see consistently here's the objections or the questions. But I think you miss the nuances if you don't listen to the call recording live, right? Where there are pauses, where there's stutters. Was it said with authority or was it said with stuttering? And so I think that's a double-edged sword, right? I don't think we've perfected it. And for the small business, nobody really wants to provide a tool for them. It's very expensive. So they don't have that. I mean, I think, Fathom, right? So call recordings are great. You could get call notes immediately. It could get API'd or fed into your CRM. So as a sales manager or leader or business owner, your CRM is getting refreshed, which used to be one of the biggest pain points, right? The CRM data was old or stale or nobody was putting notes in. Well, now you could get that done in real time. So that's substantially different. You could get that to feed into Slack channels, right? So that's phenomenal. So I think, I'm bullish, obviously. I've been a tech geek since day one. I started out as a computer programmer in college, computer science major, till I went to go visit my cousin and met her boyfriend and all the people that were in the computer lab at U of I. And I realized I would never be as good of a programmer as they were because they were so far above me. So I immediately went over to the business school, right? But I've been using technology to enhance everything I do since day one, right? And try to be an early adopter of both hardware and software, right? So I'm old enough to remember when ACT was a phenomenal
Mhm.
CRM, and it was a game changer for us. And you're shaking your head, yes. So you remember that product. And, that was, I went out and bought it on my own dime because I knew that a really robust CRM would be much better than index cards, right? So the one card system. But now you think about, HubSpot with all the AI plugins, it's a different world for sellers. Now, some of it we kind of relate too much and rely too much on technology. And this is still, I think, a person to person process, right? There's human interaction that has to happen at all times in sales. And I don't think that, I've been around for the death of salespeople too many times, right? Websites, everybody's going to buy from a website. Boom, it's gone. Google, everybody's going to just buy from Google. Salespeople aren't needed. Well, we're still here, right? And I could go through the list. And my guess is the telephone was going to get rid of people and, you name it. So I think there's always going to be a need for this, the human selling, the human interaction, the understanding, the conversion, the persuasion, the service, right? And so I think that is. I was just on with somebody that runs a really great consulting firm that focuses on process and systems. And she uses AIs for a lot of maybe the beginning data creation. But she said because of AI, when I get on with a person, I expect that person to be much more higher level, right? So we were using an example of chatbots, and she was like, when I'm communicating with a chatbot, the chatbot gives me really good answers and really definitive stuff, right? So that's AI. We've programmed that in, and it's really, really good. But at a certain point, the chatbot can only go so far. Now I need a human. But when I get on with a human, one is I expect that human to have a higher level of understanding of what's going on and to be as buttoned up. And I think that's what we as leaders have to realize, that the AI experience is at this level. Well, we can't add humans to it and bring it down. We got to bring it up. And I think there's nuance to that. And so, yeah, I might have less humans on my payroll, but those that I have really have to be A players and on their game and getting leveled up over and over and over again. And so I think there's always going to be a need for managers and supervisors to help with that leveling up. The tools of AI are going to provide that, but I think the level of employee has got to be at a higher level, and their desire to get better and level up has to be better and better and better.
That's
How's
really
that for a
interesting
long
and
answer to a
very
short
important,
question?
actually. That was perfect. But you're bang on, Nick. Like for the human element, if companies are leveraging AI to automate a lot of the admin tasks or give them great reporting instantly, you have to be that much more effective to focus on the bigger picture. Otherwise, the value is becoming less clear in terms of which option do you use. Long term, I think you kind of answered this, but if you could solve one major challenge, say, maybe besides making sure the funnel's full all the time, what would it be?
If I think helping people utilize the value of AI, but to make better decisions, to become better thinkers. I think, artificial intelligence, there's a word in there, intelligence. We have to be leveling up our intelligence as humans. And I think you could do it one way, which is just let AI do all the thinking for you. And then now you're just regurgitating what they're saying. Or you say to yourself, how do I enhance my thinking and my value to the marketplace and my value to my customers through this? And I think that's the one thing, right? That's the one thing that I think we're missing, right? Because everybody's like, oh, it's taking jobs away. Is it? Or is it just making us better? I believe, let's boil it down to medicine. I think AI, from everything I read, is going to make practitioners of medicine, whether it's nurses, RNs, doctors, MDs, rad techs, whatever it is, going to make them better because they have so much access to so much information. But they're still going to have to synthesize this information and make the right value decision for the patient that's in front of them at this time. And I think the same thing is going to happen in business, right? I think the same thing is going to happen in education. The professors aren't idiots, and I remember my daughter who just graduated a handful of years ago, 3 years ago now, right? They used to run their term papers through plagiarized machines, right? And say, okay, how much of this is plagiarized? And so they're going to be running them through filters of saying how much of this is just regurgitated from AI, right? So it's the it's the research that has to be done when you're doing long-term critical thinking, but it's the application or the intelligence of the artificial intelligence to make you better and deliver better. So I think that's what I'm the most bullish on, and that's what I think we as leaders, you and I and everybody listening to this, as business owners, as all of that, have to really be harvesting with our employees. It almost has to become our mantra.
So, Nick, where do you want to be 6 or 12 months from now? Staying the course, focusing more on recruiting, focusing more on the sales performance team, or leveraging more technology, or just have you optimized things already?
No, I haven't come close to optimizing things, right? So we are constantly trying to test new tools because we test them on ourselves before we bring them to our clients, right? I never want to test a tool on a client. So I want to be optimizing all the tools possible. I want to be an AI first organization and really focusing on best in breed AI and all that through. I think we want to continue to really dial in our processes and our systems, and we could be better at that on both companies. And 12 months is a long time, Search. There might be another need in the marketplace, and maybe I've started a third company. The goal was to have a really good ecosystem so that when I go to sell this, it's got a much more enterprise value to whoever wants to buy it.
Well, Nick, this was really insightful. I really enjoyed this conversation. And Nick can be found at salesperformanceteam.com. Am I missing any other ways to get a hold of you, Nick?
No, I mean, I'm on LinkedIn, right? So it's Nicholas Loise, Loise on LinkedIn. Probably the best social media to find me. You could also find me on Facebook for sure. You could go to our website, yoursalesrecruiter.com or Sales Performance Team. For your readers, they could go to salespack.salesperformanceteam.com, salespack, P-A-C-K, salesperformanceteam.com. And we provide a lot of info goodies and things that we've learned. We're an info first company, right? I was trained by a gentleman by the name of Dan Kennedy. So we try to provide as much content to people for free. It's part of my give back. Because there's been a lot of really good information that I've learned from and gotten value out of. And I just hope to provide a sliver of that to the world from the stuff that I do.
Well, I want to thank everybody for joining the AI Surge podcast, where we explore how AI is shaping industries and accelerating innovation. I'm your host, Surgical, and today I'd like to thank Nick Loise, who is the founder of Sales Performance Team and your sales recruiter based in Chicago, Illinois, for joining us. Nick, it was a real pleasure. I really do appreciate the time today.
Thank you. Thanks for this topic. I mean, it forced me to really think about it as I prepared for this. So I appreciate that. And I just get excited about anybody that wants to talk about AI, and the work that you're doing is phenomenal, and keep it up. Creating a podcast is a labor of love, and you got a great team around you. They're highly professional. And so just keep up all the great work.
I appreciate the time.